Hello. This is, I don't know, the second meeting that, or I don't know, thought that we should have recorded, but this is the first recorded one, I guess. Um, yeah, I was just saying that I had a good conversation with Jagosh on Friday. Thank you for that. And I thought we should all talk together about AutoFlow and the question that I have is what should we do next? Uh, and also, I wanted to just talk with Natalia after this demo. We haven't had a chance to discuss it and what's next, and in general, what we are doing, what we are not doing, and so on. So that's why we
So,
are talking.
quick note, I have iteration 2 ready. I wasn't able to demo it. I literally finished it about 30 minutes ago. I can make a very quick demo. And for Grzegorz, the iteration 2 was very simple front end. We don't create any visual interface yet. We just want to be able to at least edit the Python code from the front end directly without diving into the repository and editing the file there. And the idea for iteration 3 is to let user create a configuration that is similar to Jira. So just visually selecting the triggers and the actions for the AutoFlow for now for plan. But that's the, sorry. So the next one will be hidden. So the code will be hidden from the user. And for real implementation, I assume we don't want to generate the Python configuration on the front end for sure. We would like to send the JSON to the backend and let the backend do the work. But for now, there are no Rails engineers that we can have, so it will be on the front end. I will just show very simple demo for a second. Let me share my screen. So here is our, let me hide the panel, and let me hide the controls too. So this is our flow pipe and additional controller for AutoFlow settings. Again, everything is very simple. And for now, we have the setup that adds ready for development when we have a milestone. And let's just, for the sake of experiment, change the name of the label. Again, for now, just in the Python code, remove it here. Well, it works. It's that simple again. But this should fulfill the simple iteration 2, at least on the front-end side.
So I have one follow-up question. Does it mean that we are making possible for users to copy paste or write the Python code in the UI, and then just we are sending this file to somewhere and then just works? Is that how it works right now?
Yes, we will never make it available for users. I assume it's very unsafe. But the API I'm using is quite simple. It's just commit. We're just committing to the file to the repository. Should work with our version control. So this is intermediary step that we want to have for the sake of iteration, basically to see how it works. Ideally, frontend should send the JSON that generates the Ruby, that generates the Starlar code on the backend. For the sake of proof of concept, we will generate the Python code on the front end for now. Again, very basic example, so we could have any kind of proof of concept without making the user persona writing any type of the code, because for plan, it's project managers, and I doubt they will able to, even if they want. So something about that.
Yeah, I think this is quite interesting iteration, but I would like to repeat what I said to Mikhail on Friday, is that I believe it's a fairly complex project with many implications of each decision that we are making here. And in order to actually leverage what we have been doing elsewhere in different projects, which has proven to be quite efficient and useful, I would really strongly suggest to create an architectural design blueprint with a section describing architectural decisions. You can take a look at the GCP integration design doc that is already using that format, and we have seen, or like from experience, I can tell that this is quite efficient. We are using this design doc to get everyone across 2 different companies on the same page. We have probably around 20 people involved in that project, or maybe even 30, including PMs. We have 15 people on GitLab side and 15 people on Google side. And without this design doc with architectural decision record, we would be just unable to move forward. And I think that the complexity of this project is probably similar, even though much less team members are involved. But still, the architectural decision record makes it easier to embrace that complexity. When you make a decision about something, you describe alternatives considered and the context, and it prevents a situation like we have seen in cells, for example, for a very long time, that someone suddenly appears and questions like all the decisions, and we start the second guessing that is actually going on for weeks, and it's actually destroying efficiency. So that's the only thing I would suggest, because this way we can also get some feedback on decisions asynchronously, which is something that's very helpful.
Okay, this kind of answers my question. So I'll start the document. I have the GCP doc example open. You sent it to me last time. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I will definitely use it as an example. I'm familiar with this way of ensuring the progress is made forward and not into a random direction. So yeah, okay. I have kind of drafted notes about the technical questions in one of the issues that are in the epic. I'll turn that and more into the doc. Okay.
Yeah, so I have one question to Natalia, because I see that we are iterating on the front end. Are there any plans maybe made by product managers in plan when this is going to land on prod, so that users can really use that? Because I think it's very important in this project to manage expectations. And I think that PMs might have some expectations that might not be really feasible on the backend side, at least.
Good thing that there are no hard expectations. We have workflow automation as a priority for the financial year, not for the quarter, which gives us a lot of wiggle room. And if it draws into the next financial year, that's not a big deal too, as long as we work on it. And PMs didn't make any hard plans because they are aware we would like to build a proof of concept first and discover better the technical challenges. Obviously, one of them will be, for example, temporal license. Are we going to have a self-hosted temporal server? Are we going to have a SaaS license? Both of them have different challenges, as Michael told, right? We will either working with infrastructure if we use self-hosted solution, or we will need to work with financial and legal if we would like to buy a license, and so on and so on. They are aware about that. And plan is quite open to work on that for now. And probably we will have at least one additional backend engineer working on the integration as long as we have a proof of concept, but no hard deadlines for us, because everyone understands it's really complex thing.
Okay, so I have one follow-up question probably to Mikhail, because it feels like we are kind of already determined to use temporal, and I think it might be really too early to make that decision. So we discussed this on Friday, but I would still ask this question, like, why is temporal better than building GitLab workflow runner, however we call that? Because I think we cannot really fully reuse GitLab runners to run Starlark. This could be quite inefficient, and we probably also don't really want to poll GitLab anymore for workflow jobs or automation jobs. Yeah, so what is the benefit of using Temporal over GitLab Workflow Runner? except of the durability of the workflows. And yeah.
So Temporal doesn't, as I said in the comment there, Temporal doesn't run any code. Workers run code, and when I say code, it's they actually execute activities. And just in my proof of concept of this idea, an activity is what runs Starlar code, and from that Starlar code, I call things like HTTP client method and whatever, anything else. So I think the main value proposition of Temporal or any other, execution, not execution engine, but I don't know how to call it, workflow engine maybe, is that it gives you an SDK to, in an abstract way, all the states storage, all the like retry policies and other policies for all the aspects of the workflow execution.
Yeah, so like, how would it be different from, for example, running Starlar code directly on Sidekey workers we have in GitLab? The Sidekey workers have SDK, Sidekey workers already have like execution environment.
Well,
Starlar seems to be fairly hermetic language, so it should be safe to run this in a multi-tenant environment on Sidekey node. Wouldn't it be easier than just employing the whole temporal machinery that is basically doing the same?
it's not doing the same. That's the thing. It's not just you start
Similar, sorry.
you start the, so it's not you start the Starlark program and it's running like for a year. No, it's running when it has something to do. So when there's like when it's not waiting for something, it's running. But if it's waiting for something, it's not actually occupying any resources. It's only state in the database. So the way it works, it's Temporal stores an event history for the workflow, for each workflow. And then once there's a new event or maybe timer fires or time or anything else, and a signal arrives and the workflow needs to be resumed, it starts that workflow,
Maybe
feeds
this
it
is what
with,
I don't understand. How can you resume a workflow? So a workflow is the Star-like program. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah. Well, in this case, yes, but in Temporal in general, it's a program using a Temporal SDK in any of the supported languages. But yeah, in this case, it's Go.
No,
I'm using the
but
Go
like, how can
SDK.
you? So you have a procedural code with 200 lines of code, right? So you
Yeah.
have the temporal SDK where you probably have some breakpoints inside. Is that correct?
Now you just write almost a normal Go code. That's the trick. And I can explain how it works, but that's what I'm doing. So it stores the history of events. And when it needs to resume execution, it feeds your program with those events and feeds your workflow program. So the workflow, maybe I should say the ZK, each event is about, well, not each, but when you need to run an activity, if there is already an event with the result of that activity, the actual activity code is not executed. So if that activity was making an HTTP call, you have the result immediately and your workflow code proceeds. And because the workflow code must be deterministic, eventually after consuming all the events, the history is empty, like it consumed all the events, the history is empty, it needs to execute the next activity. And that's how all the variables in the program, all the state of the program arrives to the exact same spot where it was when it was stopped. So and then it makes the next step. And that's how it works.
Yeah, so this is the missing piece of a puzzle for me because I don't understand how the workflow execution with like this durable workflow really differs from a user just writing some Starlar code that we are going to execute even though it's probably idempotent and deterministic. So how does this really differ from what Temporal is doing, and why the way in which Temporal is doing that is better?
Well, if you want to have a long running workflow that doesn't lose all its in-memory state when a server restarts or whatever, and that's not consuming all the resources where it doesn't need to, then you have to do something, right, to stop the execution and then resume the execution.
Okay, can you give me
That's
an
the
example
difference.
of such workflow? Can you?
Well, in the
Just
first
give me an
demo,
example.
sure, in the first demo, the simplest example is if you watch the video, you see there's just a variable that counts the number of times the workflow reapplied the labels, fixed the issue, fixed the labels on an issue. And after the fifth time, it leaves a comment. So there in the middle of the demo, after like 4 seconds or something iteration, I stopped the worker. So there is no worker. I could also stop the temporal server, but it's a dev server. It's only in memory. Normally, all that is in the database. So yeah, you can stop everything and then restart everything. Then I removed the label and it continued the incrementing the counter. I can even open the slides if you want.
Okay, can you
But
show the Go code that is doing that right now? Because I
the
feel like if this is Go code, we will probably never allow customers to write Go code.
you don't need no. The Go code. So SDKs in Go, basically it exposes bits and pieces of the Go SDK as starlark primitives. And some of those that I exposed is select to wait for multiple one or more timers or signals or there's something else. But customers don't need to write Go code. It's the
I know, I understand that. Okay, so I think the action item here for me is to still try to better understand the temporal, because I think we do have a few fundamental design decisions here. One is whether to use temporal or something else. Two is how to make it possible for our users to write automation, whether this is going to happen in front end by moving boxes around like in Jira, or do we want really require them to push something into the repository, or perhaps we can combine both. So this second fundamental decision that we will need to make. The third one is around the GitLab events platform, because without that we will not be able to send events to either temporal or whatever else is going to be built. And there is probably a fourth fundamental design decision that I can't remember right now, but my point is that whenever we actually are building a complex architectural design, we are building a feature that is sufficiently complex, we need to iterate on identified fundamental design decisions separately. So the key to success for a project like this is to identify our fundamental design decisions and to figure it out how to iterate on them in parallel or separately without coupling them together. So it seems that in the project we have a fairly good understanding of how we could do that. We are already iterating on front end. We already have some POCs for the temporal side. We already are thinking about GitLab events platform and how we are going to dispatch events from GitLab. So it feels like this project is definitely a project that we can iterate on in the way that I just described. Yeah, so I think what I'm usually doing is I'm going to that design doc and I'm documenting these fundamental iteration paths, so that everyone in the project understands what are the fundamental design decisions, why we are iterating on them separately, and what we have done to decouple them from each other so that separate iteration is actually possible. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think I mean I agree with you that there will definitely be people who will come and ask why temporal or why this and why that. So yeah, definitely this definitely needs to be an architectural decision so that it's done and dusted, and then we don't need to answer that 10 times.
Yeah,
And
and the
also,
more impactful a decision is, the more people we usually need to involve to get feedback from them.
mm,
And I think that this is easier to do it once you have that architectural decisions in a merge request with context, with decision, with alternatives considered, and the reasoning behind the choice. I still have this gut feeling that temporal might be a good solution, even though it, in some ways, it is actually conflicting with our GitLab CI architecture. But we can probably figure it out and then integrate this with CI in some way or another. It could be possible, but still we need to describe in writing why we were making that decision. And right now, I'm not even sure if we have enough context to really make that decision. Temporal feels like inherently difficult to explain to someone, and I still don't understand it fully. But yeah, so do you want to focus on action items? Because I think we have like 3 paths right now: better
yep,
understand temporal and how it works, iterate on front end continuously, and start writing the design document describing the fundamental design aspects of that thing. And yeah, I can collaborate with you, Mikhail, on better understanding temporal. I think Natalia can just continue on iterating on the front end, and then we all then can collaborate together, all 3 of us, on the design document. Does that make sense? Cool. Any
yep.
questions? Any other things you would like to discuss?
Uh, yes, I just wanted to add something first. Uh, if you haven't watched the first video, I know it's long, I'm sorry, but it explains a lot, I hope. And watch it on 1.5x. I think it's worth
Yeah, I
watching.
tried to do that. 1.5 was still too slow for me, so I started like clicking the right arrow, and I'm
Okay.
certain that I actually missed a lot of important things.
Okay.
The feedback that I have for the demos is that, from my experience here at GitLab, people will not watch demo that is longer than 5 minutes. It
Yeah.
seems like it's terrible, but that's truth. I never record anything that's longer than 5 minutes. People just will not watch that. And even if they do, they will fast forward, and it will still take them 5 minutes, but they will miss most of the things. So this is my suggestion for future demos. Yeah, but it's very difficult to be so concise and fit everything in 5 minutes, but you can still probably choose the most important things and demo them in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to answer lots of questions in that video. It's not only the demo, like the demo, I think it's 12 minutes or something. And
Yeah,
the
then what
rest,
I would
like,
do, I would
this.
divide that video into like multiple videos, and I would create a message where this is where the demo is linked. This is where you can learn more about X. This is where you can learn more about Y and Z. And
Mhm.
I know this is more work, but like otherwise demos just don't work.
Well, I also created a slide deck, hoping that people can at least look at the slides.
I saw that. The slides
And
were actually very good. So
but they are not as informative, of course, because it's like that much text versus all the talk. So anyway, yeah, happy to pair on looking at the code, or going into the weeds and figuring out why it's this and not that and so on. Because yeah, it's not super straightforward to understand. I agree. And also the way the SDK works is kind of very, very interesting. But yeah, we can get into the details on another call, I guess. And the other thing I wanted to actually discuss with Natalia, but it's in general useful, I think, to talk about, is the in the second demo I used that level-based approach in the workflow, which is not what you wrote in the epic, in the what you like, what I want basically is not, I didn't do what you want. There are no events for those things in this proof of concept. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying I didn't, yeah, I couldn't add them. It's a Ruby, and also I'm not sure they should be. The workflow is more robust if you do it on a level-based with a level-based approach. Like in your demo, you updated the code, removed the label, but there was no transition of the milestone, right? And the label was still added. So it's definitely a big plus, and it's actually what people expect, I think. It's actually what you want. You want to say, when this is the situation, I want it to also be here and here and here and so on. But that doesn't apply to everything, but often it is how you want it to work. So my question here is, what are your thoughts on the UI for this approach versus trigger condition action, which is an edge-based approach? It's like not a trigger, but when this is like that, so like you can basically say when this field is equals or something to that, then also make that other field with this value, so it's rather than when it changes, you check the current state versus what is the transition. What are your thoughts here?
We can leave it like this for proof of concept, and in the future we will have both approaches, I believe, because for some events it will make sense to keep it in levels. For some particular things, we will still need triggers and conditions, unfortunately, especially when working with related items. But that's not in the scope of proof of concept, because if we start implementing everything right now, we will never just finish this one, even for the demo purposes. So I'm completely fine with implementing it with levels right now. And then we can take feedback from PMs, for example, because they know product needs better. Like, okay, this particular part needs triggers. But again, for now, for the reduced complexity, I'm completely fine with levels.
Is the current plan to actually use that UI-based wizard to actually generate a code that will be committed to a repository? Yeah, because I think from my experience, I think this is a prerequisite, because I don't think other engineers would be on board with the idea of doing that fully in UI without even having an option of using repository and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that this UI, like creator of workflows is actually going to be useful. So it makes sense to me.
I mean, again, that's only for the proof of concept mostly. I'm not a big fan of generating Python code on the front end either. And I believe that our SREs would eat me alive if they saw what I'm doing right now. There needs to be a backend layer for that, because I would much prefer, if we opt for Visual Builder, to send the JSON to backend. That's the safest way we can
Yes,
have. And
that makes sense to me. I even don't know if we are going to use Python actually.
yeah, that's why frontend it should be absolutely language agnostic. I'm sending JSON, and after this, like, frontend is completely blind. We just let backend decide on the internals. And this is the future iteration. And for options, I think in the future, not a product, but we should allow both Visual Builder or JSON, YAML, language, whatever, for advanced users, and give a huge warning, like, you're changing the actual code. So please make sure you're not doing anything stupid, and add a lot of verification and validation on backend, so we assure this code is executable and safe. But again, that's for the future things that we will probably add to additional part to architectural design document, like things to consider at least, because we will be making decisions on the most important parts, but we also need to add a list of questions to answer in the future.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
I think another really important thing to, maybe we can call it a goal even, is to make it possible to somehow run your workflow locally and unit test it. If we end up with code, then we should be able to let people unit test it. So, and it's kind of not necessarily writing code to execute, like to unit test code. It's, I'm thinking maybe we could let people specify a list of, you know, events or a list of states, and then use them to drive
sounds
the.
like, for me, it sounds like ADR 001. You can probably already make that decision that all the workflow code that users are going to use has to be designed in a way that it's unit testable. Because right now, the biggest pain point for GitLab CI YAML is that you can't unit test it. And it's a huge problem for more complex pipelines where you basically need to run a pipeline that will take an hour to see whether it actually runs, and you will probably miss a job that is not there, but it should anyways when you look at it in the UI. So yeah, this is like an ATR that I would add immediately because I think it's completely valid. And this is the true, you know, strength of ADRs, that small but very important and impactful decisions like that will not get lost in like myriads of comments in issues and epics, and you know, it is somewhere someone writes something and you will just not be able to find it again after some time.
Okay, I don't have anything like urgent or in general anything to discuss synchronously. Okay, I guess we have the action items. We can schedule meetings as we need, and Grzegorz, we can just pair on looking at the code at some point soon.
Yeah, so I
Yes.
think I will focus on allocating some time to look at Temporal just by myself. I think
Okay.
there is no for you to stay late. I will probably figure it out. Then we should probably start working on the design doc, and then we should probably set a date for the next meeting, because if we don't do that, a month later we will still be in the same place as we are today. So that's a good principle, a due date for everything. And as an engineer, I hate due dates, but if you don't have them, like nothing is really moving forward. So my suggestion is that maybe we could meet in like 2 weeks from now. What do you think about that?
Yeah, bi-weekly is a good point. Let's meet 2 weeks from now, because after this we will also have the summit. So this will probably throw every part of work out. And I agree with Grzegorz, like if we hadn't have a meeting, I probably wouldn't be able to finish iteration 2. It's nice peer pressure to show something on the meeting. One additional small action point, and I probably will be the DRI for this one. Let's document the local setup. The message from Mikhail was extremely helpful. It's actually everything I needed. We just need to put it in the doc in the epic somewhere so people could set up it locally and play around it, especially those that don't have CAS running. So I will probably create a little guide and edit somewhere too.
Yeah, that is probably a good subpage in a design doc. So sometimes we create design docs in GitLab Rails repository. There is a docs architecture blueprints directory. Sometimes we just choose to create a separate repository. I think both solutions are fine. I also wonder if it would make sense to meet during GitLab Summit to actually talk about that with maybe a bit broader audience. Yeah, so this is also something. So it feels like it might be a good idea to have some design doc merged somewhere before the GitLab Summit, because there may be people really interested in talking about that in Vegas.
Okay, I'll start working on it tomorrow because yeah, it's kind of what I wanted to work on anyway. And sorry, but I will be away from from 21st. I have a short holiday before summit, but I will be working for a week just before summit. So 7th of March, and on the 10th I'm flying out. So 7th and 8th we could have a call if you want. Or actually I'll be back on the 4th, 5th of 6th probably as well. Yeah. So the week before summit, except for Monday, I can also join.
Okay, so
Another.
let's do that then. Okay, cool. Thank you. I think this was a very productive meeting. So see you next time then.
See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.